England, 1814. Peace had returned to the kingdom, but to Lord Adrian Blackwell, peace was merely a rumor that visited other men. The war had left his shoulders scarred, his estate in ruin, and his heart long dead. For 7 years, Westmore Hall had been his prison, a sprawling grey manor wrapped in ivy and whispers, where servants spoke in lowered tones, and guests had long since stopped coming. The grand ballroom, once alive with music, lay silent. Chandeliers gathered dust, and the mirrors reflected nothing but ghosts. And on the first stormy night of October, the gates opened again. A carriage rolled slowly up the winding road, its wheels slicing through the fog. The driver urged his horses forward through sheets of cold rain until, at last, the lights of Westmore flickered faintly in the distance, a promise, or perhaps a warning. Inside that carriage sat Lady Evelyn Ashcombe, gloved hands clenched upon her lap, eyes fixed on the shadows that danced beyond the glass. Her breath trembled as she whispered, "It's only for a night." But her heart knew she was lying. She had sworn never to return here. Not after what had happened. Not after the night that destroyed everything she once believed about love, loyalty, and herself. Yet fate, cruel and persistent, had a way of dragging her back to the places she most feared. As the carriage stopped before the front steps, she lifted her veil. The sight of the old manor struck her like a memory reborn. The same tall doors, the same arched windows that had once glowed with laughter and light. But now, it looked hollow dead, like him, the butler. Old Mr. Hensley stood waiting with a lantern, trembling slightly in his hand. His hair had turned white since she last saw him, but his eyes softened the instant they met hers. "Lady Evelyn," he murmured, uncertain whether to bow or to fall to his knees. "We were told." "I know what you were told," she interrupted gently, stepping down onto the wet stones. "But the dead don't stay buried forever, Mr. Hensley." Her words lingered in the air like smoke. Inside the manor, a fire flickered in the library, the only room that still bore the warmth of life. Lord Adrian Blackwell, Viscount of Westmore, sat before it, one hand resting on the arm of his chair, the other cradling a glass of brandy that caught the light like liquid fire. He stared into the flames, his thoughts moving as slowly as the clock that ticked behind him. Every sound in this house echoed, and yet, when he heard the faint creak of the front door, his heart forgot how to beat. Mr. Hensley's hesitant voice broke through the silence. "My lord, there is a visitor." Adrian didn't look up. "No one visits Westmore. Send them away." The butler hesitated. "It's Lady Evelyn, my lord." And the glass shattered. For a long moment, nothing moved. The fire hissed softly as brandy dripped into it. Then Adrian rose, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair slightly disheveled from restless nights. His eyes, gray, sharp, and tired, turned toward the door. "She dares," he murmured. "After 7 years, she dares walk through these doors again." But even as he said it, a quiet tremor ran through him, for no matter how he had tried to forget, her name still lived inside him like an unhealed wound. When Evelyn entered, the world seemed to shrink around them. Her gown, though simple, carried the grace of a woman untouched by time. But her eyes told another story. They were weary, guarded, and full of something even deeper than regret. She stood before him without bowing, without smiling. The candlelight traced the outline of her face, the same face that had haunted him for years, the one he had painted over 100 times, in his mind, only to burn it each dawn. "Lady Evelyn," he said finally, his voice low but dangerous, "hell must be rather dull if it's begun to send its angels back." Her jaw tightened. "I came for my sister's letters, that is all." Adrian gave a mirthless laugh. "You expect me to believe that? That you've braved a storm, returned to the house you once called cursed, only for a few pieces of paper?" "Not cursed," she said softly. "Condemned. And I suppose we both share that fate." The air between them thickened. He stepped closer, each footfall slow, deliberate, like a predator circling a ghost. "You shouldn't have come here, Evelyn." "And yet I did," she whispered. Their eyes met. A collision of memory and pain. For a moment, both saw not the years that had passed, but the night that had broken them, the accusations, the betrayal, the letter she left behind on his pillow before vanishing at dawn. He had hated her for that. He had loved her for that. And now, seeing her again, both those emotions warred violently inside him. The storm outside raged harder. You'll have your letters, Adrian said finally, his voice cold as stone. Then you'll leave Westmore and never return. I never intended to stay, she replied, though something in her voice faltered. Just enough for him to notice. He moved to pour another drink, but found his hand trembling. 7 years, Evelyn, 7 years of silence. And now you appear, as if the past were nothing but a chapter we could close at will. I didn't come to rewrite the past, my lord, she said quietly. Only to face it. Adrian turned sharply. And if the past refuses to face you? She smiled faintly, not of humor but of sorrow. Then I suppose it will haunt us both until we are bones beneath the same soil. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face for the briefest moment. Beautiful, defiant, and terribly sad. She began to walk past him toward the library's far shelves, where portraits hung, relics of a lineage once proud. Her gaze stopped upon one, a painting of a young girl beside her older sister, both in white dresses, sunlight caught in their curls. Her sister, Clara, gone now. And with her, the truth Evelyn had come to reclaim. She reached for the frame, brushing off the dust. You still keep it, she murmured. I don't destroy the dead, Adrian said behind her. Only the living. Her eyes shimmered, but she refused to let him see her tears. Then I should be safe, for I've not truly lived since the night I left you. The fire burned lower. The rain softened to a whisper. Then, Adrian's voice, quiet, almost breaking, filled the space between them. Why did you come back? She turned. And for the first time, he saw fear flicker behind her strength. Because I found something, she said. Something your mother hid. Something that proves everything you believed about that night was a lie. Adrian's entire body stilled. What did you say? She took a step closer, her voice trembling, but sure. I came for the letters. Yes, but not because of my sister. Because of you, Adrian. Because I know now that you never betrayed me. And I never betrayed you. The air cracked like thunder. He stared at her, searching, disbelieving, furious. You dare speak of truth now? Her eyes met his, unwavering. It's time you finally heard it. And just as lightning flashed across the windows, the doors burst open, the storm howling through the hall, extinguishing half the candles. Westmore had woken again, and with it, the ghosts they both tried to forget. The storm had raged long into the night. By dawn, Westmore Hall lay drenched and glistening beneath a silver sky, its once grand courtyards, flooded with the tears of heaven. The scent of wet ivy hung in the air, mixing with candle wax and old grief. Lady Evelyn Ashcombe sat alone in the library, the same room that once held her laughter, now heavy with ghosts. The dying embers in the hearth crackled faintly as she unfolded a letter sealed in her sister's handwriting. Her fingers trembled, not from cold, but from memory. It was dated the 3rd of June, 1807, the day after everything fell apart. My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, then I have failed you. There are truths Father made me swear to hide, and lies the Viscount was never meant to know. But love has its own kind of punishment, and I fear we've both been sentenced. She stopped reading, her vision blurring. The words sank like stones into her chest. Clara had written this before she vanished. Before that dreadful night, when Evelyn was accused of something unspeakable, something that tore her from the man she loved. Behind her, a floorboard creaked. Adrian was there, silent as a shadow, watching her from the doorway. His shirt was open at the collar, his hair still damp from the storm, his eyes unreadable. Seems we both have a habit of trespassing where we shouldn't. She folded the letter carefully, holding it to her chest. It concerns my sister. It always did, Adrian said coldly. Your sister, the perfect Clara, the innocent, the one who watched as her elder sister destroyed my family's name. Evelyn turned then, her voice trembling with fury. I destroyed nothing. You believed the worst of me without a moment's doubt. Adrian's jaw clenched. You left, Evelyn, without a word, without defense. And would you have listened? She demanded, rising to face him fully. When your mother accused me of deceit, when she claimed I had traded affection for fortune, you never once asked me if it was true. He looked away, his throat tightening. The truth of her words burned like fire through him. I saw the letter, he muttered. The one addressed to another man, signed with your name. Her lips parted. a faint, bitter smile breaking through. "That letter," she said softly, "was written for you. It was my confession, my plea for mercy. Your mother intercepted it." For a moment, everything inside him went still. The rain outside began again, soft and rhythmic, like a clock counting down the seconds before collapse. "My mother," he whispered. "You're saying she—" "Yes," Evelyn interrupted, her voice firm. "She wanted me gone. I was not fit to be your wife. Not with the Ashcombe name, not with my father's debt. So she forged another letter and placed it in your study, where you would find it." Adrian took a step back, disbelief flickering across his features. "You expect me to believe that?" She reached into her reticule and drew out a second parchment, brittle, faded, and sealed in the wax of the Blackwell crest. "I don't expect belief, Adrian. I expect you to read." He hesitated, then snatched it from her. The paper cracked beneath his grip as he broke the seal. His eyes scanned the first few lines, and the color drained from his face. "My dear son, love is a fickle indulgence for men in your position. Marry where advantage lies. The Ashcombe girl was never worthy of Westmore. Consider this letter her farewell, forged by my hand, to ensure your freedom." The handwriting, his mother's unmistakable flourish. Adrian staggered a step backward, the letter falling from his hand. The room seemed to tilt around him. Evelyn watched him silently, tears glistening but unshed. "She ruined us both," she whispered. "And for 7 years, I bore the weight of your hatred, without defense." He looked up at her then. Really looked. The woman before him was not the vague girl he once knew. She was stronger now, tempered by heartbreak, her beauty sharpened by pain. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to fall to his knees, and beg her forgiveness. But pride, that cruel companion, held him fast. Instead he said, "You should have come sooner." Evelyn laughed bitterly, and turned away again. "I had nothing left, Adrian. Nothing but my sister's words and a grave I visit alone." Her voice cracked on that last word. Something inside him shifted, the years of bitterness and silence crumbling under the weight of guilt. He stepped closer, reaching out before stopping himself. "Evelyn." Her name on his lips after 7 years was almost unbearable. She turned to the window, hiding her tears. "Do you know why I came back?" she asked quietly. "Because your mother is gone now, and with her the truth she buried." Adrian's gaze fell. "You think the truth can change what's been done?" "I think," she said, her voice trembling but steady, "the truth is the only thing left that can save us." A silence followed, long, heavy, filled with things neither dared say. The clock struck 8. The storm outside had become a drizzle, a soft lullaby for broken hearts. Evelyn folded Clara's letter once more, and tucked it into her sleeve. "I'll leave by morning," she said. "I've no desire to haunt this place longer than I must." But Adrian's voice stopped her at the door. "Stay." The word hung between them, fragile and dangerous. She turned slowly. "For what?" "For the truth," he said. "For as long as it takes to uncover every lie my family told." Her eyes met his cautious, wounded, searching. "And when you find it?" Adrian hesitated. "Then perhaps I'll finally know what kind of man I became without you." For the first time in 7 years, Evelyn allowed herself to look at him, not as the Viscount who'd condemned her, but as the man she'd once loved with every heartbeat. Lightning flashed once more, painting his face in gold and shadow. She whispered, "Be careful, Adrian. The truth rarely sets us free. It only chains us to what we fear most." And with that, she left the room, her footsteps fading into the hollow corridors of Westmore Hall. Adrian stood alone, the letter burning in his hand. Outside, dawn broke, pale, uncertain, and fragile, like forgiveness itself. The night of Lady Whitford's grand winter ball arrived like a whispered promise of ruin. Snow fell over London like lace, coating the cobblestones in ghostly white, and the Whitford mansion burned with 1,000 candles, each one flickering against mirrored walls and gilded columns. Cecilia stood at the top of the staircase, her gown a deep emerald that shimmered like the sea under moonlight. Around her, laughter echoed, champagne sparkled, violins swelled. Yet her pulse beat with dread, because tonight she would face him, Lord Alaric Montgomery, the man whose proposal she had once rejected, And the man her father was now forcing her to marry. She had not seen him in 3 years. Not since that rain-drenched evening when she'd broken his heart and chosen her family's security over love. But fate, it seemed, was not done with them. When she saw him enter the ballroom, every sound seemed to vanish. He wore black, severe and elegant. His hair brushed back, his eyes, those sharp silver eyes, scanning the room until they found her. Her breath caught. The same Alaric she once loved stood there, but colder now, like marble carved into a man. He approached with unhurried grace, his steps deliberate, his expression unreadable. The crowd seemed to melt away. "Lady Cecilia," he said, bowing slightly. "It's been a lifetime." Her lips trembled. "3 years, my lord, and yet you look untouched by time," he said smoothly, though there was bitterness beneath his tone. "Tell me, does your heart still belong to your father's ambitions, or have you learned to choose for yourself?" She looked down, her gloved fingers tightening around her fan. "You speak as though I had a choice." He leaned closer, voice low enough for her alone. "You did. You just didn't choose me." Before she could respond, the orchestra began a waltz. He extended his hand, and though her heart screamed no, her body betrayed her. She placed her hand in his, trembling. As they danced, whispers rippled through the crowd. Their movements were perfect, too perfect, as though every twirl and step carried years of unspoken regret. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "Oh, but I had to," he murmured. "I made a vow to your father, to restore your family's name. But tell me, Cecilia, will you let me save your family again? Or destroy it this time?" Her heart raced. "What do you mean?" His smirk deepened, dangerously close to cruel. "Let's just say the Whitford fortune has more cracks than its marble pillars, and your father, it seems, gambled more than just his wealth." Her eyes widened in horror. "What have you done?" He twirled her one last time and leaned close, his voice like velvet over steel. "Only what you taught me, my dear. Never love without consequence." When the music ended, the room erupted in applause, but Cecilia could barely stand. He bowed and left her trembling in the center of the floor, her world beginning to crumble beneath the shimmer of chandeliers. Outside, thunder rolled through the London sky. And inside, 2 hearts that once burned for love now danced on the edge of revenge. The next morning, dawn crept through the tall windows of Whitford Manor, like an uninvited ghost, pale, cold, and full of questions. Cecilia had not slept. The storm had raged all night, but the real tempest was inside her. Lord Alaric Montgomery's words echoed in her mind. "Your father gambled more than just his wealth." She sat by her writing desk, trembling fingers tracing the edges of an old letter, the only thing left of their love. 3 years ago, she had written to him, begging forgiveness. He never replied. Now she knew why. He hadn't forgiven her. He had returned to ruin her. But ruin or not, she would not be silent. When the clock struck 8, Cecilia stormed into her father's study. The old Duke of Whitford sat behind his mahogany desk, the firelight revealing the gray in his hair and the guilt in his eyes. "Father," she began, her voice trembling but sharp, "what have you done?" The Duke froze, his quill pausing mid-scratch. "Cecilia, my dear, what is the meaning of this intrusion?" "You know exactly what it means," she shot back. "Lord Montgomery knows something. Something about our fortune. He said, you gambled away our name." Her father's shoulders slumped, the pretense of dignity collapsing into exhaustion. "I did not gamble it away. I lost it to him." Cecilia's breath caught. "To him." He nodded slowly. "Years ago, when your mother fell ill, I borrowed from Alaric's family. His father was a cruel man, interest upon interest. When he died, Alaric inherited not just the title, but the debt. And now, it seems, he's come to collect what was promised." Her voice broke. "Promised? What did you promise him?" The Duke turned toward the fire, his reflection flickering in the flames. "You." The word shattered the silence like glass. Cecilia staggered back, one hand to her lips. "You sold me to him." Her father's voice cracked with shame. "It was the only way to save our home. He swore he'd forgive the debt if you became his wife. I thought you loved him once. I thought it would not wound you so deeply." Tears burned down her cheeks. "You thought wrong." She turned away, her heart thundering with betrayal. The fire behind her hissed, as though mocking her grief. That evening, a carriage arrived at the gates, black as midnight, with the Duke's crest carved in silver. Alaric stepped out, immaculate as ever, his gloves spotless, despite the mud and snow. He entered the manor without invitation, his boots echoing across the marble floor. Cecilia stood at the top of the staircase again, the same place where she had watched him at the ball. He looked up at her with that same smile, both cruel and tender. "So, has your father confessed?" She descended the steps slowly, every word trembling. "You planned this, every bit of it." He tilted his head. "Planned? Number, I merely waited. You made your choice years ago. I'm simply collecting the consequence." "And what do you want from me now?" she demanded. "My hand, my humiliation, my tears." His gaze softened for a moment, just enough for her to remember the boy who once loved her beneath the rose garden. "No," he said quietly, "I want your truth." "My truth? You broke my heart, Cecilia. I deserve to know why." For a moment, neither spoke. Snowflakes drifted through the open door behind him, melting on the marble like fading ghosts. Then she said softly, "Because loving you would have destroyed him." Alaric's expression hardened again, though his voice wavered. "And what about me? Did you think I survived your mercy unscathed?" She stepped closer, her voice a whisper. "You didn't come back for revenge, Alaric. You came back because you never stopped loving me." Silence. Then, a bitter laugh. "Perhaps. Or perhaps love is just the prettiest disguise for vengeance." He turned toward the fire, the light painting his face in gold and shadow. "Either way," he said, "the wedding will be announced tomorrow." Her breath caught. "You wouldn't." He looked over his shoulder, eyes sharp as glass. "Oh, I would, because whether it's love or hate, Cecilia, you are mine now." And with that, he left the room, his footsteps fading into the dark halls of Whitford Manor, leaving her trembling beneath the weight of fate she could no longer escape. Outside, thunder rolled once more, and this time, even heaven seemed to mourn the love that was turning into war. The night stretched long and heavy, every second a needle pricking Cecilia's heart. She sat before the dying fire, still in her pale evening gown, her eyes unfocused and haunted. The house had gone silent after the Duke's ultimatum, too silent, like a crypt. She could still hear Alaric's words echoing in her head. "You are mine now." But somewhere deep within her, something hardened. She had cried her tears, she had tasted despair. Now, what remained was resolve. The next morning, the air in Whitford Manor was thick with whispers. Servants hurried through corridors, carrying letters, flowers, and packages, all addressed to the future Duchess of Montgomery. It was as if the entire world had already accepted her fate, except her. While her father avoided her gaze, and her sisters whispered behind closed doors, Cecilia wandered into the West Wing, a part of the manor long abandoned. The air smelled of dust and forgotten memories. Here, her mother's old study still stood, untouched since her passing. She brushed her hand along the shelves, her fingers tracing the cracked spines of old books and faded portraits. She didn't know what she was searching for, perhaps courage, but what she found instead was something entirely unexpected. Behind the old writing desk, hidden beneath loose floorboards, lay a sealed envelope, yellowed with time, bound with an emerald ribbon. It bore the Montgomery crest. Her pulse quickened. She tore it open. Inside was a letter, written in delicate, feminine handwriting, one she recognized at once. Lady Evelyn Montgomery, the Larrick's mother. Her trembling fingers unfolded the paper. "To the Duke of Whitford, if this letter ever finds you, it means my time is done, and the sins of both our houses remain unpaid. You must know, my husband's cruelty was not yours alone to bear. When you borrowed from him, you did so out of love for your wife, and for your children. But what you do not know is that your daughter was not the only one who suffered from this arrangement. My son, Alaric, loved Cecilia Whitmore long before either of you knew. He spoke her name in every letter, every dream. When he learned that your debts bound him to her by duty, rather than choice, he broke. He believed she was promised to him only through pity, not affection. I tried to tell him the truth, that you both were victims of our father's arrogance. But he would not hear me. If you ever wish to mend what was broken, tell them this. Alaric was never your enemy, nor was Cecilia his punishment. They are the last hope of undoing what greed destroyed. With a mother's dying plea, Evelyn Montgomery. Cecilia froze. The letter shook in her hand, tears blurring her sight. All this time, he had loved her still. His hatred was never for her, but for the lie that poisoned their love. She pressed the letter to her heart, as if trying to absorb the truth into her very soul. Then, without another thought, she ran down the corridors, past the servants, out into the courtyard where the storm had quieted into a pale dawn. A horse stood waiting near the stables. She didn't care whose it was. She didn't care whose it was. She climbed onto the saddle and galloped down the muddy road toward Montgomery Hall. When she arrived, the mansion loomed dark and cold against the sky, just like the men inside it. She burst through the front doors, soaked from rain and breathless. Alaric was there, standing by the hearth, half-dressed, his shirt unbuttoned and his hair disheveled from a sleepless night. His eyes widened at the sight of her. Cecilia. She threw the letter at him. Read it. He caught it, confusion flashing across his face. As he read, his expression shifted from disbelief to pain to something raw and unguarded. His lips parted. This was my mother's handwriting. Yes, Cecilia whispered. She wanted you to know. You were never forced to love me. Alaric, you always did. We both suffered because of lies. He sank into a chair, the letter trembling in his hand. All these years, I thought you betrayed me. I thought you chose duty over me. I never did, she said softly. I only did what I thought would protect my father. And you? Silence fell. For the first time, Alaric's eyes softened, not with anger, but with sorrow. Then he stood, stepping close, his voice low. You came all this way to tell me this? I came, she breathed, because I could not marry a man I loved under a lie. Something broke inside him then. The iron mask he had worn for years melted away. He reached out, his hand trembling as it brushed her cheek. Then let the truth bind us, he whispered. Not vengeance, not debt, just us. And for the first time in 7 years, the Duke who had sworn never to love again, kissed her. The storm outside finally died, but the real storm, the one that had raged between them for years, turned into a quiet, fragile peace. Yet deep within the shadows of Montgomery Hall, another figure had been watching, and he too held a letter. The morning light broke cold over Montgomery Hall. The storm had passed, leaving behind a hush, the kind of stillness that comes only after something irreversible. Cecilia awoke in the Duke's chambers, the faint warmth of his hand still resting near hers, the scent of smoke and roses lingering in the air. For the first time in years, she felt peace. But peace, in the Montgomery household, never lasted long. She rose quietly, wrapping his robe around her, and wandered to the window. Outside, the estate stretched vast and gray under the winter sky. Servants hurried to and fro, preparing for another day, unaware that their master, the cold and distant Duke, had finally been broken open by love. Behind her, Alaric stirred. You're awake too early, he murmured, his voice husky. You should rest. I couldn't, she whispered, turning to him. Not after last night. He smiled faintly, a rare, tender smile. Nor could I. But even as their eyes met, something flickered in his unease. It lasted only a moment, but Cecilia saw it. What is it? She asked. Alaric hesitated. There's something I must deal with before breakfast. Nothing of concern. He kissed her hand, dressed swiftly, and left the room. Cecilia watched him go, her heart tugged by a sense of foreboding she could not name. In the Duke's study, the air was thick with tension. The steward, Mr. Hale, stood waiting, pale and trembling. He was an aging man, loyal for decades. Yet today, his composure had shattered. My lord, he stammered, clutching a worn ledger. I fear there's been a misunderstanding, a terrible one. Alaric's eyes narrowed. What do you mean, Hale? The steward swallowed hard. his voice cracking. "The letter, my lord. The one from your mother that Lady Cecilia brought you. It wasn't meant for you." The Duke froze. "Explain yourself." Mr. Hale's hands shook as he opened the ledger and revealed several sealed envelopes. All bore the Montgomery crest, identical to the one Cecilia had found. "Your mother wrote 2 letters before she passed. One to you and one to your father. But I was ordered by the late Duke to destroy them. I couldn't bear to. I hid them in the west wing of Whitford Manor, thinking they'd be safe there." "I never imagined." Alaric's expression darkened. "You're saying the letter Cecilia found may not have been—" "It may have been the one addressed to your father," Hale whispered. "A plea for him to spare your mother's honor and a warning about the Whitfords' deception." The Duke's jaw tightened. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. "What deception?" Hale dropped his gaze. "Lord Whitford borrowed heavily, yes. But when he could not repay, he offered his daughter's hand, not to unite your families, but to blackmail the old Duke. He threatened to expose the affair between Lady Evelyn and your father unless the marriage was arranged." The room spun. Alaric's hand clenched into a fist, the edges of the desk biting into his skin. "My father? And her mother?" Hale nodded miserably. "Yes, my lord. Cecilia and you were born of rival houses bound by guilt, not grace. Your mother's letter was never meant for your eyes. It was her confession, not her blessing." For a long time, the Duke said nothing. Then, softly, dangerously, "Get out." Hale stumbled from the room, nearly tripping over his coat. When the door closed, Alaric pressed his hands over his face. His world, so carefully rebuilt from ashes, had just been shattered again. He thought of Cecilia, of her trembling voice, of her eyes full of truth and light, and now he could not even trust that truth. Because if what Hale said was true, then his love for her was born not of fate, but of sin. Cecilia found him an hour later, standing before the fireplace, his face a storm of anguish. "Alaric?" she said softly. He turned, his voice low, almost broken. "Tell me, Cecilia, do you know who your mother was to my father?" Her breath caught. "What? Answer me. I don't understand." He laughed bitterly. "No. Of course you don't. You couldn't. Because your father kept you wrapped in silk and silence, while mine buried every truth in this cursed house. He threw the letter, her mother's letter, into the fire. Flames devoured it, curling the edges, turning confession into smoke." Cecilia gasped, tears welling in her eyes. "What are you doing?" "Ending a lie," he said hoarsely. "You and I were never meant to be, Cecilia. We were made to be, by deceit, by blackmail, by sins of the dead." "That's not true," she cried. "Whatever they did, it doesn't change what we are. It changes everything." He roared. "You were promised to me as payment for my father's shame. And now I find that the woman I love may share the same blood that ruined my mother." Silence fell, sharp, suffocating, endless. Cecilia's face went pale. You think we're—" He turned away, his voice breaking. "I don't know what to think anymore." She stepped closer, trembling. "Then let me think for you, Alaric. Whatever truth lies buried, we will face it together." But he didn't look at her. His gaze stayed fixed on the fire, on the ashes of the letter that once gave them hope. And as Cecilia backed away, tears spilling down her cheeks, she knew the man she loved was gone again, swallowed by the same ghosts that had cursed their families for generations. Outside, snow began to fall once more, silent, merciless, and endless. The next morning arrived shrouded in mist, as though even the heavens wished to hide the disgrace of the Montgomery estate. Cecilia awoke in the guest chamber alone, cold and hollow. The echoes of Alaric's anger still lingered in her ears, sharp as shattered glass. He had left before dawn, the servants whispered, taken his horse toward London, where business, or perhaps bitterness, awaited him. But Cecilia did not weep, not anymore. Her tears had dried into resolve. She would not leave this house with her name soiled by half-truths and shadows. She would find the truth, if not for love, then for peace. She dressed herself in a plain wool gown and descended into the depths of Montgomery Hall, the oldest parts of the mansion, where dust and memory mingled in silence. The library was locked, the study guarded. But there was one place no one ever went, the cellar archives, where ledgers of every generation were kept. She found the key beneath the portrait of the first Duke. Her hands trembled as she descended the narrow stone stairs. The air grew colder, the walls damp with age. Rows upon rows of ledgers lined the walls, books of debts, dowries, and promises long buried. She searched for one bearing the date of her father's agreement with the late Duke. Hours passed before she found it. Montgomery accounts, year 1809. She dragged it to a table, brushing off the dust. The leather cracked beneath her fingers as she opened it. At first, it was just columns of numbers and names. Then, halfway through, the ink changed. The handwriting shifted from the neat script of a steward to the rushed, emotional scrawl of a woman. Her breath caught. Evelyn Montgomery. The same hand as the letter. My heart cannot bear the lies anymore. The Duke believes our fortunes are saved, but I know the truth. The Whitfords have demanded more than coin. He means to bind our son to their daughter, as payment for my silence. He believes it will cleanse our name, but it only deepens the rot. I cannot tell Alaric it will destroy him, yet I must write it here. For one day, he will know. Cecilia Whitford is not his sister's blood, but she carries her shadow. And that shadow will haunt them both if they love as we once did. Cecilia's heart pounded. Not his sister's blood. The words shimmered on the page like light through tears. She turned the page and found another entry, this one in a different hand, the steward's. The Duchess Evelyn took ill after writing this. The Duke forbade any mention of her confession. He ordered the ledgers sealed and replaced with copies. I have hidden this original in the cellar, should her son ever seek the truth. Cecilia's vision blurred. Her knees gave out, and she sank to the cold floor. The truth. The real truth. She was not Alaric's blood. Their parents' sins did not bind them by family, only by history. Their love was never cursed, only stolen by those who came before. Lady Whitford? The voice startled her. She turned and froze. Mr. Hale, the steward, stood at the entrance, his face pale and eyes hollow. But something was wrong. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but guilt. I see you found it, he whispered. Cecilia rose slowly, clutching the ledger. You knew. He nodded, tears glistening in his old eyes. I did, and for that I have sinned more than any master I've served. The old Duke forced my hand, threatened my family if I revealed his affair. I destroyed nothing, but I buried everything. Why tell me now? Because the new Duke deserves to know, Hale said weakly. And because he's in danger. Cecilia's stomach dropped. Danger? From whom? The creditors, Hale breathed. The ones your father owed. They were not just merchants. They were men of Parliament, soldiers of power. They've come to collect what's left of the Whitford debt through the Montgomery estate. And they mean to ruin him. Her hands tightened around the ledger. Then I must reach him before they do. But Hale shook his head. You cannot. He's already gone to Whitehall to settle it. He believes he can buy silence. But they do not want coin, Lady Cecilia. Then what do they want? He met her gaze, voice breaking. They want the Duke's name. Hours later, Cecilia rode through the fog toward London, the ledger bound to her chest beneath her cloak. Each hoofbeat echoed like a heartbeat against the frozen road. When she reached Whitehall, the city roared with chaos. Carriages, guards, and whispers of scandal. She pushed through the crowd, her gown torn, her boots soaked in slush. At the grand steps of Parliament, she saw him, Alaric, surrounded by men in black coats. Men she recognized from her father's old ledgers. The creditors. One of them, Lord Ashcombe, held a sealed document in his gloved hand. Sign this, Your Grace, he said coldly. Renounce the title, and your estate remains untouched. Refuse, and we expose everything, your father's crimes, your mother's affair, and your union with the Whitford heiress. Cecilia stepped forward. Don't, she cried. The crowd turned. Alaric froze, his face pale with disbelief. Cecilia. She climbed the steps, her cloak slipping free, revealing the ledger in her hand. "You will not take his name," she said fiercely. "Because I have proof that your lies end today." The men laughed, but she opened the ledger anyway, her voice trembling yet unyielding. "This book holds the Duchess's confession. The debts, the blackmail, the lies, all orchestrated by you, Lord Ashcombe. My father never made those deals freely. You forged the papers, forcing both houses into ruin." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Alaric took the ledger, scanning the entries, his eyes widening with dawning fury. "My God," he whispered. "You're right." Lord Ashcombe's smile faltered. "You have no proof of my hand." Cecilia raised the final page, a signed note in Ashcombe's own handwriting. "Except this." The color drained from his face. The guards seized him before he could flee. The crowd erupted in murmurs and shouts. Alaric turned to her, his expression unreadable, torn between relief and disbelief. "You came back for me," he said softly. Cecilia's voice broke. "I never left you." He stepped forward, cupping her face in his hands. "Then let the world say what it will. I will never doubt you again." And before the eyes of London, the Duke of Montgomery, a man once carved of pride and vengeance, kissed the woman who saved him not from scandal, but from himself. Snow fell again, drifting through the grey morning, turning Whitehall into something almost holy. The evening of Lady Eleanor Whitby's wedding was unlike any London had seen in years. The grand ballroom of Winterbourne House glowed like 1,000 captured suns, chandeliers dripping with crystals, walls laced with ivy and gold, violins humming softly under candlelight. Yet, amidst all that splendor, it was her calm that silenced the crowd. She stood at the top of the marble staircase in a gown of moonlit silk, her hair bound with pearls, not as the ruined girl the gossips once whispered about, but as the Duchess who had made the Duke kneel. When she descended the stairs, all conversation ceased. Lord Ainsworth, the man once feared, once untouchable, waited at the base, his eyes never leaving her. For months, London had debated why a man like him would choose her. Some said pity, others said power, but when he took her hand that night, there was nothing in his gaze but a devotion so fierce it could ruin kingdoms. The orchestra swelled. They began to waltz slow, perfect, the world vanishing with every turn. "I still remember the night you threw your glove at me," he murmured against her hair. "And I remember," she whispered back, "that you never gave it back." He smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in years. "Because I intended to keep everything that belonged to you." A soft laugh escaped her lips. "And if I say you don't own me?" He leaned closer, his voice dark velvet. "Then I'll spend my life trying to earn you, every single day." The waltz ended, but the music did not. It echoed in the memory of every guest, in every glance that followed them as they walked away, together. Outside, snow began to fall, coating London in white. The bells of St. George's tolled in the distance, a solemn hymn for the end of winter and the beginning of a love that had defied ruin, scandal, and time itself. Years later, when children ran through the halls of Winterbourne, and portraits of the Duke and Duchess watched over them from gilded frames, London still whispered her story. They said she was the woman who made a duke fall to his knees. But those who truly knew her, the servants, the friends, the family, told a different tale. They said she was the woman who taught a man how to love. And so, the legend of Lady Eleanor Whitby lived on, not as the forgotten Whitby sister, but as the heartbeat of Winterbourne, the Duchess who tamed the storm.